People think silence is empty. It isn't. Silence has texture. It has weight and temperature and a particular smell, like rain on concrete. Like the inside of a library at 7 a.m. when you are the first person there and the building hasn't decided yet whether it belongs to you or you belong to it. I have lived inside silence for 7 years. I know its every corner. My name is Park Junho. I am 21 years old. I have not spoken since I was 14, and I have stopped expecting the world to make space for that. Hansung University does not make space for it either, but it is at least consistent. I know which professors will call my name during roll and wait. Embarrassed before moving on. I know which convenience store cashier has learned to just show me the total on the screen, without the performative, here you go, that some of them still attempt, aimed just past my shoulder like I'm a problem they're solving for someone else. I know which benches stay empty, long enough for me to eat lunch alone without it becoming a scene. I have one friend, Lee Ariam, a linguistics grad student who learned KSL 2 years ago without telling me she was doing it. And one afternoon simply signed, "Your coffee is getting cold," across the table and watched my face like she was waiting for something to break open. Something did. I have trusted her ever since with the parts of myself that still need somewhere to go. Everything else I carry alone, not bitterly, just factually. The first day of media and human communication, I arrived 8 minutes early and chose the seat by the window, third row from the back, far enough from the front that no professor would call on me for participation, close enough to the door that leaving was never a production. He came in after the room was already full. I heard him before I saw him, not his voice specifically, but the shift in the room's atmosphere that happens when certain people enter, a kind of collective unconscious adjustment, like sunflowers. I looked up because the seat beside me was the only one left, and I wanted to see who was about to become my problem. Choi Seojun was tall in the way that seemed slightly unreasonable. He had the loose, unhurried walk of someone who had never in his life been the last person anyone wanted to sit with. He dropped into the chair beside me, glanced over, and said, "Hey," the way you say it to furniture, reflexive, not particularly aimed at anything. I looked back at my notebook. When the professor reached my name during roll, there was the pause. There is always the pause. 7 years, and I still feel it. Like a small stone dropped into still water, the ripple of someone recalibrating how to handle me. She moved on. I kept my eyes on the page. Beside me, I felt Seojun notice. He was watching her, then watching me, with an attention that was different from curiosity, more careful. I didn't know what to do with careful. For the in-class exercise, I had my whiteboard out before anyone turned around. Preemptive, like always. Easier to establish the terms before someone else establishes them for you. Seojun turned to me and said, without any of the usual hesitation, "I'll partner with you." I looked at him. Not warmly. I was running a small private calculation, not cruelty. Just survival. Is this someone killing time? Or someone performing goodness for an audience? His face didn't give me a clean answer. I clicked my pen and wrote, "Do you know KSL?" "No," he said. Easy, not apologetic. I turned the board toward him. "Then we'll manage." He talked too much. I had expected that. What I hadn't expected was that he talked at me rather than past me, asked questions. He waited for answers to read my written responses fully before responding to them. Didn't once reach for his phone. By the end of the hour, I still couldn't tell if I found him exhausting or interesting. The honest answer was probably both, and that bothered me in a way I didn't examine. When I packed my bag to leave, he said, "Same time Thursday?" I gave him a look that I intended to be neutral, turned and walked away. Outside, the October air was cold enough to feel like something, and I stood in it for a moment longer than I needed to. Something had moved in that room that I couldn't quite locate or name. Like when you hear a sound in a building you thought was empty and stand very still, listening for whether it repeats. That night I was in bed with my lamp off when my phone lit up. Ariam, sending me a voice memo of herself, reading a new paper on linguistic adaptation in deaf communities. She does this sometimes instead of texting. She says it's easier. I think she does it so I fall asleep to a voice that doesn't expect anything back. I didn't fall asleep, though. I was thinking about something I hadn't let myself think about all day. During the exercise, at some point, Seojun had laughed, not at me, just at something he'd said that landed wrong. And it was the laugh of someone who found himself genuinely funny without needing anyone to confirm it. A very private sound coming from a very public person. I had noticed it. I noticed it. I turned over and pressed my face into my pillow and made a decision. The way you make decisions at night when you're tired and your defenses aren't working properly. I was not going to let this become anything. I didn't have room for things that started warmly and ended with me, standing somewhere alone, recalibrating again. I was very certain about this. On Thursday, he walked in and signed, badly, slowly. Every hand shape at least 10% wrong. Hello, my name is Choi Seojun. I went completely still. Because you don't learn that overnight for someone you plan to forget. I corrected his hand shape. That was how it started. Not softly. Not with some cinematic moment of two people discovering each other across a crowded room. Just me pointing at his wrist, adjusting the angle with 2 fingers, and watching him do it again. Better, not perfect. He grinned like he'd won something, and I looked away before my face could do anything I'd regret. I told myself I was only helping because bad signing is genuinely painful to watch. That was true. It wasn't the whole truth. October became November, the way seasons change in the middle of a city, not all at once, but in small surrenders. The leaves on the path to the humanities building went from gold to brown to gone. The campus started smelling like heating systems and convenience store ramen. Seojun started appearing. Not just in class. In the library on Tuesday afternoons. Always the same table by the far window. Textbooks open but often ignored. His phone face down. Which I noticed because people who are waiting for something keep their phone face up. He wasn't waiting. He was there on purpose. Practicing signs from a notebook he'd filled with his own phonetic shorthand. Little arrows indicating hand direction and movement. He showed it to me once casually, like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. That notebook had weeks of work in it. I didn't say that. I pointed at 3 entries where he'd confused the movement, and he nodded and fixed them without complaint. We worked in near silence, him signing slowly, me correcting, occasionally writing something on my whiteboard when a concept needed more than a gesture. He learned fast, faster than Ariam had, and she had formal linguistics training. I didn't say that either. Ariam noticed before I did, the way she always notices things before I'm ready to acknowledge them. We were in her apartment, me on the floor with my back against her couch, her above me braiding her hair. When she signed one-handed, "You seem different lately." I signed back, "I'm not. You're eating lunch inside now. You hate eating inside." I considered lying. Ariam has known me long enough that lying is more effort than it's worth. The outdoor benches are cold. She looked at me with the particular expression she reserves for when I am being technically accurate and emotionally dishonest. "Who is he?" My hands stilled in my lap. "What makes you assume it's a he?" She smiled and said nothing, which was the most infuriating possible response. I signed, "He's no one. He's learning KSL," a pause I couldn't quite control. "He's learning it well." Ariam set her comb down slowly. "Junho, don't. I'm not doing anything. You have that face." "I just think—" "Ariam." I signed her name with the emphasis that means stop, and she stopped. But she was looking at me with something soft in her eyes that I didn't want there. Softness from people who care about you is sometimes the hardest thing to sit with. It assumes a future I hadn't yet decided was safe to want. I went home and lay awake and thought about the notebook with the arrows, and the way Seojun always angled his chair slightly toward me without appearing, to notice he'd done it, and the fact that he never once, in all our weeks of library sessions, pulled out his phone while I was writing something. I thought this is how it starts. Then I thought, this is also how it ends. The fracture I'd been waiting for arrived on a Thursday, wearing the face of an ordinary bad day. I'd had a nightmare the night before, the kind I don't talk about. The kind that leaves me feeling scraped clean and tender in places I can't point to. I came to class already running on empty, already slightly outside my own body, the way I get sometimes when the past sits too close to the surface. Seojun was late. He slid in beside me, slightly breathless, and immediately signed, "Sorry, practice ran over." I nodded once, fine, looked back at my notebook. He tried to sign something else, a new phrase he'd been working on, something about the weekend, and he made a mistake I had corrected twice before. The same mistake, the same hand, the same wrong angle. And I turned and looked at him with an expression that was sharper than I intended, sharper than he deserved on an ordinary day, and he felt it. I know, he said, adjusting. "I'm still getting it." And something in me, tired, scraped clean, operating without its usual insulation. Thought, for how long though? He practiced the sign again. I watched him and felt, with a clarity that frightened me, how much I had already let in. How many Tuesday afternoons? How many corrected handshapes? How many times I'd looked away from his face specifically, because looking felt like standing too, close to something hot. After class, he fell into step beside me outside, easy as breathing, like this was established, like we were people who walked somewhere together. I stopped. He stopped too and turned, and his expression shifted when he saw mine. Something moving behind his eyes. A recalibration. What's wrong? I pulled out my whiteboard. Why are you still doing this? I wrote. Then, because the tired, frightened part of me had gotten hold of the pen. People don't usually keep going this long without wanting something back. The words landed. I watched them land on his face. He was quiet for a moment that felt like standing at the edge of something. Then, carefully, he signed, not spoke, signed, in the language he had learned specifically for this. What if what I want back is just this? His hands were steady. His handshapes were almost perfect. I looked at him standing there in the November cold and felt the fracture line run all the way through me. Clean and irreversible, the way ice cracks just before it gives. I didn't write anything. I walked away. But my hands were shaking, and not from the cold. I have a system for bad mornings. Cold water on my face first, then the window, open, even in winter, just for a minute, just to let the outside air confirm that the world is still running on its ordinary schedule regardless of what my nervous system is doing. Then coffee, black, standing at my small kitchen counter while my phone stays face down on the table, because the first thing I see in the morning shapes the entire architecture of my day. I broke the rule on a Wednesday in late November. Ariam had called 4 times before 8 a.m. Ariam, who knows my mornings, who has never once called before 10 without a reason that justified it. I sat down before I answered. Her face on the screen was careful in a way that meant she had already decided how to say whatever she was about to say. She signed slowly, precisely. There's a video. Campus Network. You and Seojun at the cultural night. It's been shared around 200 times since last night. I didn't move. The caption makes it sound like... She paused. People are speculating. Someone found your student profile. There are comments. I set the phone down on the table without ending the call. Sat very still. Through the screen I could see Ariam watching me, her hands folded, not signing anything, because she knew that sometimes what a person needs in the first 30 seconds of bad news is for no one to say a single word. I knew this moment. Not this exact moment, but its shape. I had been here before, made into a subject. A curiosity, a thing people discussed in comment sections without considering that I might read them. I knew the particular cold that settled in your chest when you realized your private life had been converted without your permission into other people's entertainment. What I did not know, what I had no framework for, was the fear underneath the cold. Because this time, it wasn't just me in the video, and I needed to know what Seojun would do with that. I did not contact him. I waited. I went to my 10 a.m. lecture and sat in my usual seat and kept my face neutral while 2 students, 3 rows ahead of me, had a conversation I could lip read clearly enough. Apparently, he's been learning sign language for months. And is it not kind of weird, though? And the particular laugh that people use when they want to seem like they're just asking questions while actually delivering a verdict. I opened my notebook and wrote nothing. I was waiting to see what shape the day would take. By afternoon, my phone had 17 notifications from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it face down and went to the library and sat at our usual table, Seojun's and mine, and opened a book. I did not read a single page of. Here is what I was really doing. I was building a case. Not against Seojun specifically, but against hope in general, which had a long history of presenting itself as something solid and revealing its actual weight only after you'd stepped onto it. I was collecting reasons. If he posts something distancing, that's a reason. If he avoids the table, that's a reason. If he signs at me tomorrow with slightly less precision, less effort, that is a reason. And I will know exactly what it means, and it will hurt in the way that confirmed suspicions always hurt. Not like a surprise, but like a door you knew was there and opened anyway. I was so busy building the case that I didn't hear him come in. I looked up and Seojun was standing on the other side of the table, coat still on, slightly out of breath, like he'd walked fast to get here. He looked at me for a moment, Then he sat down, pulled off his coat and signed. I should have warned you. I'm sorry. I stared at him. Not because the apology surprised me, because of what wasn't in it. No explanation. No, it's not what it looks like. Or I told them we're just study partners. No damage control. Dressed up as sincerity. Just the apology, clean and direct. Aimed at the right thing. Not at his own discomfort, but at mine. I picked up my pen. Wrote, did you post anything? No. Are you going to? He looked at me like the question genuinely hadn't occurred to him. Why would I? I wrote, to manage it, to give people a simpler story. He leaned forward slightly. Signed, careful and deliberate. The true story is not complicated. I don't need a simpler one. Something shifted in my chest. I looked down at my notebook, breathed. Then my phone lit up on the table between us, face up. Because I'd forgotten, and we both saw it. A notification from a basketball team group chat. I couldn't see the full message, but Seojun could. And I watched his jaw tighten for just a second before he turned his phone over. What did it say? I wrote, nothing important. Seojun. He exhaled. Dongwook said coach wants to talk to me tomorrow. About, he gestured vaguely at the space between us. Distractions. I felt it then. The specific guilt of being someone else's complication. I wrote quickly, you should distance yourself. This isn't worth your position on the team. He read it again. And then he looked at me with an expression I was not prepared for. Not anger, not frustration, but something quieter and more devastating than both. Like I had said something that genuinely wounded him. Don't do that, he said. Out loud, just above a whisper. Do what? Decide what I'm willing to pay for things. That's mine to decide. I opened my mouth, reflexively, stupidly, the ghost of a voice I hadn't used in 7 years, and closed it. My hands found the whiteboard. I don't want to be the reason your life gets smaller. He signed back immediately. No hesitation. You are the reason several things in my life got bigger. I put the pen down. My throat felt like something was sitting on it. We stayed in the library until closing. We didn't resolve anything, but when we finally stood to leave and walked out into the frozen night, our shoulders touched and neither of us moved away, and that small, stubborn warmth was the only true thing in an otherwise brutal day. The case I had been building collapsed entirely. I didn't rebuild it. I have never sent anyone a voice note, not once in 7 years. My voice is something I keep in a locked room. I don't visit often, not because I physically can't access it, but because the last time I used it I was 14 years old, screaming into a phone on a dark winter road, and afterward the silence felt less like loss and more like the only honest response to what had happened. I chose it. Then it chose me back. Now we have an agreement. So I don't fully understand what happened at 2 a.m. on a Thursday in December. I woke from the nightmare, the usual one, the road, the dark. My sister's name leaving my throat like something torn, and sat upright in my dorm room with my heart doing something architectural to my ribs. The room was black except for the streetlight pressing through my curtains. I sat there breathing, waiting for my body to remember what year it was. Usually I open the window. Cold air, ordinary world, ordinary schedule. Instead I picked up my phone, opened Seojun's contact, and before the part of my brain that makes careful decisions could stop, the part that was still half asleep, and raw and exhausted from 7 years of carrying things alone, I pressed record. I didn't speak, I just breathed. 31 seconds of my own breathing in the dark. Proof that I was here and alive and present in the correct year. And then I sent it and put my phone face down and lay back down with my arm over my eyes. I was certain I'd made a catastrophic mistake. My phone buzzed 4 minutes later. I'm here. 2 words. No question mark, no, are you okay, no, what was that? Just the simplest possible confirmation. I'm here. Like he understood instinctively that what I had sent wasn't a request for anything except to not be completely alone in a 2 a.m. room, and that the correct response was presence, not interrogation. I read it twice. Then I slept, and it was the first genuinely restful sleep I'd had in weeks. But this is not a story that moves in straight lines. 3 days later, we had the worst fight since we'd known each other. And it started like most real fights do, from something almost too small to name. Seojun had come from a team dinner and arrived at my dorm slightly irritable. I could see it in his posture, the way he held his shoulders. Coach had made another comment about focus. He hadn't told me this directly, but Ariam had heard it from Dongwook and told me with the careful expression she uses when information comes carrying damage. He signed something. I don't even remember what. Something ordinary. Asking about my day. But his hands were slightly sloppy from tiredness. One handshake bleeding into another, and he signed confused when he meant busy. And I misread it and responded to the wrong thing. And he frowned and corrected me. And something in the tiredness and the irritation sharpened his expression into something that felt, in that particular raw moment, like impatience. I went quiet in a way that is different from my ordinary quiet. He felt the difference immediately. "What?" he said. I picked up my pen, set it down, picked it up again, wrote, "When this gets too hard, just say so." He stared at me. "What is that supposed to mean?" "You're frustrated. You're tired. Your coach is giving you problems because of me. I'm telling you the door is open." "I don't want the door open, Junho." "Everyone reaches a limit." I wrote it fast, pressing too hard into the whiteboard. "Everyone, and I would rather you leave now than perform patience for 3 more months and disappear anyway." The room went very still. Seojun looked at what I'd written for a long time. When he looked up, his expression had moved through frustration into something quieter and more serious, and he signed, slowly, making sure every handshape was correct. Because he knew I needed to see the effort even now, especially now. I misread a sign. "You thought I was impatient with you. That is not the same as leaving." My jaw tightened. "You don't know what leaving looks like from my side," I wrote. "Then show me." I looked up sharply. "Show me," he repeated quietly. "What does it look like?" What did it look like before? Because I'm not reading your mind. Junho, I need you to tell me what I'm actually up against. The thing about being nonverbal is that people assume it is only your voice that is inaccessible. They don't realize that sometimes the hardest language to produce isn't spoken or signed. Sometimes it is just the truth in any form, handed to another person without the protection of ambiguity. I took a breath, pulled the whiteboard close, and I told him about the road. Not everything, not yet, but enough. My sister's name, the winter, the phone call, the last sound I ever made and what it cost, and why the silence afterward felt like the only thing that belonged entirely to me in a world that had just rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. He didn't move while I wrote. Didn't reach for me. Didn't say "I'm so sorry," the way people do when they want the conversation to be over. He just read every word, slowly, and when I set the pen down, he signed. "Thank you for trusting me with that." Not "that explains everything" or "I understand now," just gratitude for the trust itself separate from what it contained. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs and looked at the wall and felt something in me. Old, heavy, load-bearing, shift incrementally toward him. A week later, we were in the courtyard when it happened. A first-year student approached asking for directions. She looked at Seojun automatically, the way people do, and Seojun said simply, "Ask him. He knows this campus better," and turned to me like it was nothing, like it was obvious, like I was the person in this partnership who had things worth consulting. I gave the directions. He interpreted. She thanked us both and left. Afterward, I signed. "You redirected her to me. You knew the answer. You didn't explain. You didn't say I couldn't speak. You just..." "Yeah." I looked at my hands in my lap. The afternoon light was going gold across the courtyard stones. The kind of winter light that makes everything look briefly, painfully beautiful. I thought about 14-year-old me on a dark road, screaming for help that came too late to prevent the damage, going silent afterward like a house after a storm. I thought about every cafeteria table I had eaten at alone, every whiteboard preemptively produced, every person who learned 5 phrases and called it fluency. I thought about a notebook full of arrows, 31 seconds of breathing sent into the dark. "I'm here." I leaned my shoulder against his. He didn't make it a moment, didn't comment or adjust or acknowledge it as the significant thing it was, just stayed exactly where he was, solid and warm and present, while the light changed slowly around us. I have lived inside silence for 7 years. I know it's every corner. This was something new. Not the absence of noise, not protection or habit or the last thing I had left of myself after a winter road took everything else. This was a silence I was sharing. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like exactly enough.